कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। जय कृष्ण बलराम कृष्ण बलराम कृष्ण बलराम, जय कृष्ण बलराम। जय वराहदेव जय वराहदेव, वराहदेव जय वराहदेव। जय निताय गौरंग जय निताय गौरंग, निताय गौरंग जय निताय गौरंग। जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद, जय जय प्रभुपाद। ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्र शतश्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी शील प्रभुपाद की, ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय, ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय, ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं, देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया, भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Divinity and Divine Service, text number 11. Vadanti tat tattvavidaha tattvam yat jnanam advayam brahma iti paramatma iti bhagavan iti shabdyate। वदन्ति तत्तत्विदस्तत्त्वं यज्ञानम् अद्वयं ब्रह्मेति परमात्मेति भगवानिति शब्द्यते। वदन्ति तत्तत्त्वविदस्तत्त्वं यज्ञानम् अद्वयं ब्रह्मेति परमात्मेति भगवानिति शब्द्यते। वदन्ति तत्तत्त्वविदस्तत्त्वं यज्ञानम् अद्वयं ब्रह्मेति परमात्मेति भगवानिति शब्द्यते। Word to word meaning. Vadanti, they say. Tat, that. Tattvavidaha, the learned souls. Tattvam, the absolute truth. Yat, which. Jnanam, knowledge. Advayam, non-dual. Brahma iti, known as Brahman. Paramatma iti, known as Paramatma. Bhagavan iti, known as Bhagavan. Shabdyate, it so sounded. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma or Bhagavan. Kindly repeat this translation. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma or Bhagavan. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The absolute truth is both subject and object, and there is no qualitative difference there. Therefore, Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan are qualitatively one and the same. The same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by the Hiranyagarbhas or the yogis, and as Bhagavan by the devotees. In other words, Bhagavan or the personality of Godhead is the last word of the absolute truth. Paramatma is the partial representation of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead, as the sun rays are to the sun god. Less intelligent students of either of the above schools sometimes argue in favor of their own respective realization. But those who are perfect seers of the absolute truth know well that the above three features of the one absolute truth are different perspective views seen from different angles of vision. As it is explained in the first shloka of the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, the supreme truth is self-sufficient, cognizant, and free from the illusion of relativity. In the relative world, the knower is different from the known, but in the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same thing. In the relative world, the knower is the living spirit or superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. There are three kinds of energies of the supreme energetic. There is no difference between the energy and energetic, but there is a difference of quality of energies. The absolute realm and the living entities are of the same superior energy, but the material world is inferior energy. The living being in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned, thinking he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is the sense of relativity in the material world. In the absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधरा श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंदा। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। So in the previous verse of this Srimad Bhagavatam, what is being said is that the goal of life's desires is not for sense gratification, but only for inquiry into the absolute truth, or for knowing what is tattva. And because a human being is meant for inquiry into this absolute truth, nothing else should be the goal of one's works. Now in this verse, what is being explained is, what is that tattva, or what is that absolute truth? Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam. Vadanti means they say, and who say that? Tattva vidaha, the people who know the truth, the learned souls. They are saying about the absolute truth, about this tattva. What are they saying? That the knowledge about this absolute truth is advayam. That is, it is non-dual. That is, it is free from all relativities. That is, this truth is not dependent on something else for its existence. That is the meaning of the word absolute. Means it does not depend on anything for its existence. And this absolute truth is known as Brahma iti, Paramatma iti, Bhagavan iti, Shabdyate. This absolute truth, which is the non-dual truth, which is not relative, has got three aspects. It is known as Brahman, it is known as Paramatma, and it is known as Bhagavan. Therefore, the goal of the human form of life is to realize this aspect of the absolute truth. So if somebody is seeking the absolute truth, he should come to the platform of understanding either Brahman or Paramatma or Bhagavan. So after one's entire study, entire austerities, if one is not coming onto the platform of understanding that the absolute truth is either Brahman or Paramatma or Bhagavan, that means he has still not come to understand what the absolute truth is. So these are the three aspects of the absolute truth, or how the absolute truth is can be perceived, is being mentioned in this verse. So Prabhupada is explaining here, what is this Brahman aspect of the absolute truth? This Brahman aspect, Prabhupada says, is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads. So the Upanishads are the philosophical summary of the entire Vedas. And in the Upanishads, what is primarily being described is the distinction between matter and spirit. That whatever is temporary in this world, which is manifest and unmanifest, that is matter. But beyond this manifest and unmanifest matter, there is a substance, and that substance is called Brahman. Now in the Upanishads, there is not much description about what are the features of this absolute truth. So what is being described in detail in the Upanishads is only negation of material form, material qualities, material descriptions, and that which is completely anti-material is what is described as the tattva or as Brahman. Therefore, if somebody is deeply into studying the Upanishads and he has stopped with that, then his understanding about that absolute truth, that which is the cause of all causes, is some anti-material substance which is called Brahman. And that Brahman is the source of everything that exists in this world. So a person who has come to this point of realization that he is not this body, but he is part of some other substance which is anti-material in nature, That is called Brahman realization. The localized Paramatma is realized by the Hiranyagarbhas or yogis. So further advance to this Brahman feature is the feature of realizing that absolute truth is seated in the heart of every living entity as Paramatma. He is seated in every atom, and he is the active force which is animating everything in this world. So from Bhagavad Gita we understand that as Paramatma, what is the Paramatma doing? He is the Upadrishta and Anumanta. So he is observing and he is sanctioning everything that is happening in this world. So a further understanding of the absolute truth is that this is not just a substance which is all pervading, which is causing everything to exist in this world, but this absolute truth is facilitating the satisfaction of our desires through the law of karma which is present. So this absolute truth is the supreme observer who is situated in all our hearts, and he is sanctioning our desires. So one endeavors to realize this feature of the absolute truth by undergoing the process of Ashtanga Yoga. So this is another school of transcendentalists who are trying to realize the absolute truth. But there is another feature which is Bhagavan, which is realized only by devotees of the Lord. Bhagavan, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the last word of the absolute truth. Paramatma is the partial representation of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead, as the sun rays are to the sun god. So the highest feature of the absolute truth is the Bhagavan feature, which is a personality of that absolute truth. So this absolute truth has got a name, has got a form, has got qualities, performs activities, and he has various relationships with various living entities. Now this is very difficult to conceive, and it is very difficult to understand by merely studying the Upanishads or by taking to the process of mystic yoga. So therefore you see that many people, they are able to accept Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki. So therefore when it comes to transcendental subject matter, many people are able to relate that beyond what we perceive in this material world, there is something which is the cause of everything that exists, which is causing many of us to sometimes succeed in what we want to achieve, and sometimes which is not giving us success in our endeavors. So there is a higher force, and therefore yes, there is merit in trying to work towards realizing that absolute truth. And the idea of that absolute truth largely in people's minds is either some impersonal substance, or as someone who is seated in the hearts of every living entities, who is able to observe what is happening and then sanction these desires which are happening. But merely by logically trying to understand that there is a supreme controller, there is a supreme source of everything, one cannot understand that the Supreme Lord has got a personality, that the Supreme Lord has got emotions, that the Supreme Lord has got different varieties of forms, that the Supreme Personality, that absolute truth, has got so many different activities to perform. All this is very difficult to conceive by our logical thinking. So as far as conception of the absolute truth in terms of impersonal Brahman, which is completely anti-material in nature, or as Paramatma who is there as Upadrishta and Anumanta, it is possible by a study of this phenomenal world. And when we experience that we are, our intelligence or our efforts are inadequate in the functioning of this material world, we are able to conceive that yes, there can be a truth which is the cause of everything, which is causing this material manifestation, and which is causing the happening or non-happening of so many activities in this world. But it is very, very difficult for any person who is even philosophically inclined to understand that that absolute truth can be a person who is performing so many activities. Therefore, we see that when many Western philosophers went to the West, when many Indian philosophers went to the West, what they were very comfortable in presenting is this idea of Brahman. Or there were many people who went to the West and prescribed ideas of meditation or yoga. So they were propounding the Vedic philosophy of the Upanishads, of the Vedanta. They were able to propound the philosophy of or the practices of yoga even before Prabhupada went to the West. Because somebody who is intellectually inclined can appreciate to that extent. But when it comes to understanding the personal feature of the Lord, it is beyond our comprehension. For example, when the Lord is performing pastimes, like He is performing activities which are very similar to any activity performed by a person of this world, a person might be thinking, why this can be the absolute truth? This is something which is being done by all people in this world. A boy is having a relationship with a girl, or a son is having dealings with his mother and father. All these are activities which we see in this material world. So if these are the activities of what you consider as God, then what is the difference between the activities of the absolute truth or the nature of that absolute truth and people in this world? Is it not? Because they all appear very, very similar. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says that how one has to understand the activities of the Lord. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo vekti tattvataha. The activities of Krishna and Krishna's various incarnations, his birth, his janma and his activities, and his karma or his leelas are to be understood in tattva, in truth. Only when they are understood in truth can they have a transcendental effect on the person who is hearing these pastimes. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo janati tattvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti so Arjuna. Because what is the ultimate goal of all transcendentalists? Whether one is trying to understand the Brahman feature or the Paramatma feature or the Bhagavan feature, what is the ultimate goal? They want to be freed from this material existence. So Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita that we can be freed from this material existence. How? By understanding that his activities and his appearance in this world are all transcendental in nature. So these activities and birth, they do not pertain to the Brahman feature of the Lord. Like there is no Brahman or there is no activities of Brahman. Similarly, there is no birth, there is no appearance of Paramatma or disappearance of Paramatma. And the Paramatma is not performing some activities or karma which we can see in this world. So what is being referred to by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is the activities of Krishna. So therefore, Bhagavan is the feature of that absolute truth which is filled with unlimited forms, unlimited activities and unlimited pastimes. Now why the Lord has to perform pastimes? Why does the Lord have unlimited activities? This is explained by the Vaishnava Acharyas. Prabhupada, he explains that by giving an example that a very, very important person, by dint of his karma, he's become very powerful, he's very, very important. And he gives the example of Prime Minister Gladstone of England. A person is coming one day to meet the Prime Minister of England. So he's a very, very powerful person. And he has come with an appointment. And when he comes there, the secretary is waiting. He receives this person. And then this person says, I have come with an appointment. I want to meet Prime Minister Gladstone. So then the secretary says, the Prime Minister is busy inside. I cannot disturb him now. So you kindly wait for some time. So this person decides to wait. Waiting. It's almost 1 hour. So he's very curious that I have come with an appointment to see the Prime Minister and it's almost 1 hour. And the secretary is also not there, not to be seen. So he knows that the Prime Minister is sitting inside in the next door. So out of curiosity, he just opens the door. And there he sees that the Prime Minister is taken the position of a horse. That is, he's put his 2 legs on the ground and his feet on the ground, and above him, his grandson is sitting. So the Prime Minister of England is playing like a horse for the sake of his grandson. So the grandson is sitting on him. He's beating him and saying, you please go around, and he's going round and round for 1 hour, and a very important person is waiting for him outside. So Prabhupada gives this example and explains, Prime Minister Gladstone has become a horse for the sake of his grandson. But that doesn't mean that he has become a horse. His position as Prime Minister Gladstone is still intact. But this Prime Minister wants to engage in a loving relationship with his grandson. And for the sake of this relationship, he is assuming that form of a horse and he is engaging in his loving pastimes with his grandson. Similarly, the propensity to love in all of us is coming because the Lord has got all these propensities. The propensity of love, the propensity for affection, the propensity to fight. All these propensities are there in the Lord. And because the Lord has got all these propensities are there in us. So why it is very important for us to realize this feature of the absolute truth as Bhagavan is because this desire, innate desire in us to reciprocate with another person, to have relationships with another person in varieties of forms, whether as a servant, as a friend, or as a father, as a mother, or as a lover, or even as a fighter, as an enemy, can be fulfilled in its fullest without any material inebrities, only when we are able to revive our relationship with the Supreme Lord. This is because the Supreme Lord engages in loving relationship only with people who are also of the same spiritual nature. Like Prabhupada is pointing out in this purport that the absolute truth, in the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same. Here, there is a difference between matter and spirit. And we are dealing in this world only with matter. And this matter means it is asat, it is temporary. It doesn't give us complete happiness. But the Bhagavan feature, the Bhagavan, because he is the absolute truth, he is complete spirit, that Bhagavan, when he comes to perform his pastimes, he is not engaged in dealing with people who are contaminated by material consciousness. When the Lord performs his intimate pastimes, he is performing his pastimes with his internal energies. With living entities who are completely spiritual, who are not contaminated by material consciousness. So therefore, if we also want to realize our full potential, our relationship with the Lord, then we also have to be cleared of our material consciousness. So when the Lord has got his forms, when the Lord appears in this world, he doesn't take a material form. Like when we appear in this world, we assume material bodies. And through these material bodies, we are trying to satisfy our desire for relationships in this world. But when the Lord is appearing in his different forms, he is not assuming a material form. There is no difference between the Lord and the Lord's form. Similarly, when we go to the spiritual world, when we take our spiritual bodies, there is no difference between the spiritual body and the spiritual form. That is what Prabhupada is telling here, that there is no difference between the knower and the known. Bhagavad Gita says, in this world there is the kshetra and the kshetragya. This body, which is the field of activities, is kshetra, and the soul and the super soul is the kshetragya. But in the spiritual world, or when the Lord, when he appears here, there is no difference between the Lord and the Lord's body. So when the Lord takes his form in different avatars, as Matsya Avatara, Kurma Avatara, Varaha Avatara, these are not material forms, which is something which is very difficult for people to understand unless they hear from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Like when Professor Sadars, he came to meet Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he was able to understand from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati about the caste system, about Vedanta, about Upanishads. And then he asked a question, but don't you think the worship of the Lord in forms like fish, boar or lion, don't you think this is some barbarism? This is some form of primitive form of worship? Is it not some form of zoomorphism where you are imposing a form of an animal upon God and worshipping that? And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati says that in Vaishnava philosophy there is no place for imaginary worship. The Vedantists or the Mayavadis, they propound that you can worship the Lord in any form. And they say that the worship of the Lord as fish, as Matsya, as Kurma, as Varaha, is because you are conceiving of some imaginary form. Because you need some form to concentrate upon, to worship. And then once you transcend that stage, then you realize that the absolute truth is impersonal. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, no. In Vaishnavism, there is no place for imaginary worship. And on the basis of Bhagavatam, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said that these forms of the Lord are eternal in nature. These are not creations of the material energy, but these are the internal energy of the Lord. They are eternally existing. So it is not that the Lord is forced to appear in the form of a boar, or forced to appear in the form of a fish, or forced to appear in the form of a lion. He assumes these forms. Why is he assuming these forms? Because he wants to enjoy in different pastimes with his devotees, and he is attracting the different living entities by performing his leelas in these different forms. So just like today is Varaha Jayanti, and the Lord has assumed the form of Varaha. Why is he assuming the form of Varaha? So we all know the story of Jaya and Vijaya. They fall down to this material world. But why are Jaya and Vijaya being sent to this material world? Jaya and Vijaya are there in Vaikunta. And we learn from Bhagavad Gita that one who goes to the spiritual world never comes back to this material world. So that again Prabhupada explains, because the Lord wants to enjoy. In Vaikunta, for the Lord, there is nobody to fight along with him. Everybody is only serving the Lord with love and devotion. So when the Lord wants to fight in this world, he does not fight with an ordinary living entity. Why? Because the Lord deals only with purely spiritual realized souls. So therefore, the Lord is sending his pure devotees, Jaya and Vijaya, to this material world, because only with his devotees the Lord fights. So therefore, Jaya and Vijaya come to this material world as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, and then the Lord has a good fight with Hiranyaksha. And how powerful is Hiranyaksha? The Lord does not want to fight with somebody who is not powerful. He has to be the most powerful person in this world. So when we read from the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find that how powerful Hiranyaksha is. So Hiranyaksha, he goes out with a club in his hands. He wants to fight with the Devatas, but when he goes to Devaloka, he finds that the Devas have already run away. Indra, Chandra, Surya, nobody is there in the heavenly planets because they are so much frightened of Hiranyaksha. And then, because in heaven nobody is there, Hiranyaksha goes into the water searching for Varuna. And when Varuna sees Hiranyaksha, he says, I am also no match for you. I cannot fight with you. There is only one person who can give you a fight, and that is Varaha. So he asks, where is Varaha? Varaha is in the depths of the ocean. What is he doing? He is lifting Mother Earth, who is drowned in the Garbhodaka ocean. And then Hiranyaksha goes in search of Varaha, and he sees this huge boar which is carrying Mother Earth on the tusks and coming out of the water. So now the stage is set for the Lord to fight with his devotee who has appeared as Lord Varaha, as Hiranyaksha. And then the Bhagavatam describes how a long fight ensues between Hiranyaksha and Lord Varaha. So when somebody listens to all this and who doesn't have this understanding which is received from a devotee of the Lord, then he will think these to be some mythological events. Yeah, these are some imaginary stories, fictitious stories. But only when we receive this description of these pastimes from a devotee of the Lord who understands in truth the transcendental nature of the Bhagavan feature or the personality of the Lord, then he can appreciate how this fight between Hiranyaksha and Lord Boar is not a mundane activity which is happening. When you look at the prayers which are being offered to the boar by the Devatas and by the sages, we are able to understand that this form of the boar as Varaha is not an ordinary boar which we see in this material world. It is completely transcendental. When it is being described that the hairs of boar fall on the ground and form the kusha grass which are used for worship, we understand that the form of the boar is not a mundane form, but it is a transcendental form. So you see that there is a fight which is going on between Varaha and Hiranyaksha. And the Lord doesn't need much time to kill the demon. How does Hiranyaksha die? Just one shot, the Lord beats Hiranyaksha under the ear and Hiranyaksha dies. So the Lord doesn't even have to personally come to kill the boar. Just one shot and Hiranyaksha is dead. But before that, so much fighting happens. There is so much exchange of words between Hiranyaksha and Varaha. And then for so much time there is fighting. The Lord is dodging, Hiranyaksha trying to hit the Lord. Then their maces fall down. Then they personally start fighting. Why all this is happening? If Hiranyaksha can be killed with just one shot, because the Lord wants to enjoy this fighting with the boar, with the Hiranyaksha. So this transcendental nature of the Lord's desire to engage in various relationships, how can it be understood? How can we understand this as truth? In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, one cannot even understand the soul by hearing about him, by listening about him. So how can one understand this reality of the Lord's pastimes and the Lord's nature merely by hearing about him or by understanding? It is not possible. Therefore, Padma Purana says, Sri Krishna Namadi Nabhaved Grahyam Indriyer Sevon Mikohi Jihwadau Swayam Eva Suratyadaha. Many people listen to these descriptions from the Srimad Bhagavatam, but even after listening, they think this to be mythological. Even people from the Vaishnava school who give discourses, they say this is all described in poetic language. These are all exaggerations. Why? Because the method for realizing that these descriptions are not merely exaggerations or poetical expressions, but are real pastimes performed by the Lord on the spiritual platform, they can be understood only when we start serving the Lord. Otherwise, Krishna's name, Krishna's Leelas, Krishna's avatars and their pastimes cannot be understood until we start engaging in Krishna's service. And that service begins by the tongue. Sevon mukehi jihvadav. With our tongue, when we start serving the Lord, how we can serve the Lord by our tongue? By chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And by honoring Krishna Prasada. So like this, when we start serving the Lord, Atasri Krishna Nama Adi na bhaved grahyam indriyer. That Supreme Lord whose pastimes cannot be understood by our senses. How can they be understood? By serving the Lord with our tongue. Sevon mukehi jihvada. With our tongue, when we start serving the Lord, what happens? Swayameva suratyadaha. These things are automatically revealed. The Lord's name, form, quality, pastimes, their transcendental nature is automatically revealed to us. Therefore, if we want to be convinced, if we want to realize the eternal pastimes of the Lord as a reality and not some imagination, if we want to understand this truth with other learned persons have understood, then the process we have to take is this process of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. I'll stop with this. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki.